So we're going to be talking about the RE Wastewater Program. My name is Chris Wilkerson. My background is in environmental work. Worked with the Department of Ecology and their spill team for several years, was a hazardous waste inspector, and then a environmental compliance inspector with the city of Seattle. 3 years ago, did a big transition from my environmental work into developing a program focused on wastewater collection from people living in RVs. This presentation is really about how that process to begin that program developed, how the program changed and kind of evolved over time. It's not the nuts and bolts of this is what running an RV wastewater program is like. I did present that first year review in 2021 at MuniCon. You can find that presentation online. Please take seats as you guys trickle in. And if you really are like, I'm sure I want to do an RV wastewater program in my jurisdiction, consider me a resource. That's a bigger process, a bigger conversation we can have right now. So what I'd really encourage people to do is to think about a potential project that you wish you could do in your jurisdiction, or you wish your staff could do, or you could get permission to do, and might be a little bit outside the normal scope. It's not directly written in the permit. You will do this. And if you have that project in your mind as we talk, I think that will help get something out of this presentation for you. We're going to talk about how we used data from both our own internal program and from other stakeholders to kind of build consensus, talk about how everything we do interacts with the wider community, and that's where we draw our power from, and then about how we didn't really know what we were doing, but we went ahead anyways, and how we had to refine what we were doing to maximize our impact. I do want to give a big preface that this program is a little different than most of the programs in the conference because it directly interacts with poverty. Personally, when I was trying to write this presentation, I had a lot of just anxiety and doubts about what I was doing. The slides felt like they were coming off as arrogant or trite or cliche or something not quite there. And I knew I had something I wanted to say. There was some sort of message. I was hoping there was some wisdom from the work we had done that this group could benefit from. And I'm not just telling you this to kind of unburden myself of some anxiety and help the presentation along. I'm telling you because that feeling was familiar. I remember it was the direct reflection of what I felt in 2019 when I was first starting the program. I was stepping out of my environmental domain where I had a lot of confidence and education. I knew what I was doing. I was an expert, into a domain where I'm dealing with homelessness, I'm dealing with poverty, all the problems associated with that. And I wasn't an expert. And so, but we still needed to move forward. I think there's a lot of opportunities in some other domains like poverty to change people's lives, to prevent pollution that we're not realizing. And I'm encouraging people to consider those options, consider what could be done, and to have courage and humility to move forward into those other spaces. Okay, so this is probably the slide that gave me the most anxiety. So this is trying to capture the thought process and the steps that went through to create this program. And again, this is just my perspective of what jumped out to me from the development process. It's literally scores of people that contributed to make this happen. I don't have time to acknowledge all of them, but we had a step where we really needed to look at the data about the little bit we knew about the pollution risk from this community. Data alone is really not enough to get people moving. You have to turn that data into a story that makes sense to them and will move them. People make decisions both with their reason, but mainly with their feelings. And that can hopefully generate political will, whether that's within your own management, your own small team, or within the greater city council, or whatever the jurisdiction's like. Hopefully you then get permission to do an intervention. As you do your intervention, you want to measure your impact and kind of see how it goes and then report out what happens. So with that in mind, think about your project. We'll go through all these steps that the RV wastewater went through, and hopefully that'll be something beneficial. So here is a graph that shows the spill data from sewage spills from RVs. First thing I want to point out is why does it start at 2012? That's not because sewage was invented then or RVs were invented then. We just didn't have the sophistication in the spill response team and in our database in the past to really be granular with the spill source. And we've invested a lot of time and energy and funding to improve our databases, to improve the training of our responders so that they could get that granularity and we could really start to see what are the different sources from our spills. So I encourage those types of investments, even if you don't know now where your problems are. If you have that data and you can look back and you can draw from it and it's organized well, it'll be powerful. And there's nothing worse than trying to get that data out of like paragraph anecdotal stuff. So the more you can granulate, the better. You'll see that the spills hovered, in the teens or so for several years, and then really started to take off in 2015. That was multiple reasons, but one of them is the population of people living in RVs did increase at that time. Enough so that internally within spill response and within the city SPU, it was enough to see, hey, something's going on here. We need to have some sort of intervention. That's when the city began a program called RV remediation. And that was a program that was really designed about trying to be reactive, kind of doing a very robust spill response type model to an encampment. So we actively would have programs that would inspect RV encampments, score them and rank them for the risk of pollution there, organize a multi-jurisdictional, very big intervention with Department of Transportation staff and parking enforcement staff and hired contractors and police and Seattle Public Utilities staff, displace an entire community, then come in and clean the drains. Not surprisingly, when we were that aggressive, we found a lot more spills, and the spill numbers went all the way up to 120 or so in 2019. So that was enough for SPU to be internalizing, this is expensive, this is a problem, we need to do something about it, but it wasn't enough by itself to say, let's do an RV wastewater program. This is another source of data about the situation, and it's really turning into starting to tell the story. So here is a op-ed published in the Seattle Times, written by Aaron Goodwin and Mike Stewart of the Stoddle BIA and the Ballard BIA Business Improvement Associations. So these are stakeholders in the community. This narratively tells the similar story. There's a lot of RVs, they're dumping waste, they're making problems, and you're not doing enough about it, city. So it was basically a complaint. And I think any jurisdiction that gets a complaint like that can be instinctually defensive. No, we're doing a great job. Look, we have this remediation program. No, we're doing a great job. We're professionals. And that makes sense. You want to preserve your credibility. However, I really encourage you, when you're thinking about your problem, if complaints like this exist in your community, that's really an opportunity. That's another data point telling you that the community cares about this. That's another potential stakeholder who you could have be an ally. That's another reason why your project should go forward. So if you can translate in your mind to see these opportunities, it'll really empower you. Okay, so this is the slide about, I just talked about how we had one partner that we identified in the business improvement districts. These are examples of other partners that we had, and I had a much busier slide that told all the different partners and the details of them. And I realized that wasn't really relevant to you guys. So really it's about thinking about your own community, your own jurisdiction, who's there, whether that's people that are advocates for your topic, people that care about fish or care about homelessness or care about property values. It could be experts in the field, it could be researchers and academics, other agencies, it could be the direct population you're trying to interact with. The point is that there's a community that exists there, and they're a resource. Tap into them, consider them valuable, treat them with respect, enroll them in gathering data, sharing information, telling that story together, because they care too. And by tapping into them, you're able to expand your reach and your power way bigger than you could alone. So we knew there was a problem. We had some data about it. We started to tell the story. So data has almost magical quality when you turn something into numbers. It wasn't surprising to realize that people were dumping sewage. It was kind of anecdotally obvious, and people could see it and smell it, and where were they going? It was obvious. But once you had it in a graph, that did a couple things. One, people that are very rational thinkers or looking with spreadsheets and budgets, they could quantify it and say, yeah, this is that number of problem. And two, you could iterate off of it and be able to track and see, were we making a difference? So did our intervention do anything positively? So the best you can do to turn your problem into a number, to quantify it, that will empower and help you overcome skepticism. So we talked about all those different stakeholders. And I think sometimes when you're starting to engage with stakeholders, there could be a lot of trepidation, there'll be disagreements, there'll be conflict, we should do it my way, not your way, that's too expensive, whatever. One of the powerful steps you can go through is, rather than trying to get to aligned action, prior to that, align your interests. Can we all agree we don't want sewage in the gutter? That's an easy yes. You get that first yes, you build to the next yes, and they're already on your side. It's already turned into we once you've gotten to that step. Personally, this is partially my personality, that I'm very biased towards action, but I encourage people to be biased towards action if you're trying to do an intervention in a new space. And one of the tools you can help convince people to do that is by highlighting that inaction is an action. What you're doing now, the path forward, that's an action. And that action is going to have costs and benefits just like any other thing you propose. And the more you can create detail and flesh that out and quantify it and make it real for people when you're going to go with your proposal, the more likely you're to get a yes or get a response. What you're doing now is going to continue to produce what you have now. Okay, so bringing it back to the RV Wastewater Program and source control a little bit, this is a problem that doesn't lend itself very well to the traditional tools and expertise and powers we already have. So people struggle with their wastewater, they're living in poverty, they dump and they spill things. Most jurisdictions are reliant on citizens to detect that, i.e. to smell it, to see it, to then know how to report it. In other words, you're not going to find all of them. A lot of them are going through, making pollution you never even hear about. Then let's say you do have a great spill team, they go out there, they start cleaning stuff up. Well, whatever's already flushed already caused pollution. Whatever you didn't get there first already caused pollution, and the response is relatively expensive and has a risk of exposure to the person as well. Then you normally follow up with, I'm going to do some education or maybe an enforcement action against this business that spilled. But this is a population, in RVs specifically, that isn't really necessarily limited by knowledge. They might be, but even if you explain to them, hey, you can do this better, they might not have the resources to do it anyways. So they really need to be empowered, not just educated. And conversely, a fine to someone who's living in extreme poverty, that's just a piece of paper. It doesn't change behavior. They don't care. So if you're acting with your normal tools, your normal strengths, which I encourage people to do, is try your strengths first, you might come short if you're working with a very impoverished population. Okay, so we got to the point where we're going to do something. 2019 into 2020, stepping into a new space we didn't have expertise. One of the great benefits we had, one of the legs up we had, is our partnership with St. Vincent de Paul. This is a charity that is prominent in the whole country, I believe, but had action already in the space. And there's a great quote there from Ellen Stewart, she was the manager of source control at the time, and or the division director, whatever titles. And having their expertise really gave us step one, step two was already done. We were starting on step three, and they got something out as well. So when our intervention actually got into the field and we were going out and visiting people face to face and doing work, we now had a team. It wasn't just me, it was me with volunteers, and that bigger team was safer and more effective. We lend each other legitimacy. So as a government agent, I have a certain level of credibility, and to some people, as a volunteer, faith-based organization, they have different credibility with other people, and together we were able to get that first conversation started a lot more effectively. And in addition, our impact was much broader. They brought different resources to the problem than I could bring, charitable goods and advice and comfort to people. And I brought budget, the vendor that we hired, and all those kind of things. So look for these potential partners, not only partners that might be advocates, but partners in action. Because there are people that probably care about your problem in your community, that want to do more to change this problem and don't really know how, or don't know how to get started, or feel like they don't have permission to do it. You can give them structure and give them that permission. Okay, so if you're going to be moving into a new space, whether that's a poverty-based space or something else, you might not really know what you're doing. And that probably will not only create the anxiety I talked about earlier, but it might just freeze you, paralyze you. I want to study this problem. I want to get good at it. I want to be an expert. I hate working in an environment where I don't know what I'm doing. But that paralyzation can defeat you. So one of the framings that I really encourage people to do is to broaden your definition of what success looks like, especially in that first year. It might not just be, I'm going to change the number of spills that happen. It might be, I'm going to understand my problem better. And so if you include learning in your definition of success, then your failures actually turn into assets, as long as you can gather something from them. Did I just go 2 minutes? Okay, so this is the slide that if you really wanted to run an RV wastewater program, you're going to be disappointed because it's a whole bunch of information. It's a whole 2 years worth of work packed in one slide. But the point is in addition to when you're acting on a new topic, to value your failures, to test a lot of things. So we had a lot of different methodologies. I personally had some biases and assumptions about what I thought would work that proved to be wrong once we actually got out there to do things. So you need to be humble, try a lot of different things, gather data about those things, and be ready to refine them over and over again. So for example, I thought that we would help people out to dump themselves. We do a lot of education. Hey, you can go dump here. These are the places to go. And maybe we could get a gas card to help pay for that. And then boom, law, no, you can't give away gas cards. That's public funds, gifting, you can't do it. So while that was a barrier, I later, through data collection about what we were doing, realized that the majority of people, over 60%, they wouldn't have been able to move anyways. Even if we gave them a gas card, there was not a licensed driver, or the battery didn't work, or the starter didn't work, or some sort of barrier so that couldn't work. So we incorporated collecting data about our intervention right away from the very get-go. It was part of how we framed and designed everything. The details of this data sheet are really not important for you guys. You want to customize one for your intervention. We did start off with pieces of paper, and I need to credit to my partner, Adam Bernstein, who got us to use a web form and be a lot more efficient. But another way that we used this data was to fine tune our interval. So if you looked online and got some expertise, it would say, hey, it should fill up in a week if you got 2 people living in there. We couldn't afford to come every week. We didn't have that capacity. So we experimented with, well, should we come once a month? Once every other month, what have you? And so we would just ask people. So we had data. How quickly do you fill up? What do you know? And so we were able to refine that and realize, hey, if we come once a month, people have enough external resources, i.e. places to go in the community, go to the bathroom, that could meet their basic needs. And we continue to gather this data as we go forward. And eventually we settled on that mobile collection was our most effective method. So what that looks like, we create a schedule of different areas we're going to visit. We have routes that we're going to go through. We meet up with our volunteer team in the morning, have a little briefing. This is where we're going to go. This is how we're going to stay safe. This is, hey, watch out for this dog that lives over here. Then the volunteers move ahead of us, try and locate RVs that want to have the service. Knock, knock, knock. I'm with St. Vincent de Paul. Would you like your toilet empty today? Then myself and the vendor, we follow up behind, set up some traffic control if we need to, get the vendor going, connect to the waste system. I do my interview, get them some supplies, be that rapport face, someone they consistently see over time. And it's proven to be effective. So this is revisiting that same graph we saw earlier. So 2012 through 2019, that's the big spike you saw. Part of that, again, is not only were they spilling more, but SPU was doing a better job of seeking out those spills, looking in catch basins. But then you can see once we started to implement a proactive effort to go take the waste away, our numbers dropped a lot, over 70% reduction in the spills that were happening. And I don't think, yeah, we'll leave it there. Okay, so remember the data that I was having, emphasizing you should gather. We were doing a survey of everyone. And since this was Seattle Public Utilities, I wanted to know about other stuff that the utility cared about. So I was asking about garbage, I was asking about water. And when I asked them about water, I just gave an open-ended question. So where do you get most of your water? And let the person respond. So they would usually say something like, oh, there's, I go over there. They didn't want to admit that they were going to the neighbors and they were stealing the water from the tap, but that's what they were doing. And this is a data point that we didn't have. We still don't really have a good picture of the level of water insecurity in the city of Seattle among unhoused people. This is just one piece of data to start to tell that picture, but this backs up with the anecdotes we would already suspect. If you don't have a tap, if you don't have running water coming to you, you're going to get it somewhere. If you don't have a support from your community to get it, you're going to rely on whatever you can to get it. And based on this data, the majority of people are water insecure. They're stealing their water. They're buying bottled water from their limited funds. They're using unsafe water sources like reservoirs and creeks. And only around 17, less than 20%, 1/5, are getting water from a source that we would hope they would get it from a church, from a nonprofit, from a good friend. Most people are water insecure based on this little piece of data we have. So comparing that to RV wastewater, why did I pull that water data out? So that water data is kind of like where we were thinking about RVs and their wastewater risk in 2015. Anecdotally, we understand, yeah, this community probably doesn't have good access to water, but we don't really understand the situation very well. We haven't yet, and I hope to be able to do this over the next year and get other parts of SPU to enroll in doing this. We haven't yet reached out to the community, to other stakeholders, to other people that have data and have stories and have advocates and concerns about water security, whether that's people from public health that are trying to track disease and lower waterborne diseases, or that's advocate community that really come from a place of compassion and passion for these people's lives and their welfare, whether it's people with lived experience. Together, we would hopefully be able to tell that picture and get the buy-in from city council or from SPU management or from the community to run some sort of intervention. And we've cracked the door on that a little bit, got a little bit of funding from the city council to try and provide some water this summer. We're going to pilot out using bulk delivery. So could we hire a truck? Could we bring water to people that way? We're already adding to the supplies that our volunteers give by buying bottled water for them, even though that's probably not a scalable solution based on the biases I have now. But this was all a product of the earlier study we did. So we gathered data that we didn't even know we would need, and then we saw a problem that we didn't fully understand, and now we're in a position to hopefully get permission to do a new intervention. So I hope that that's a useful framing that you can apply to some of the problems that you see in your jurisdiction, your community, about studying it, turning that information into a story, seeing how that story reflects other advocates in your community, using that story to change the minds and the hearts of people in power, getting out there and doing stuff even though you're scared and you're not sure what you're doing, refining what you're doing to get better at it, and having faith you're making a difference, and measuring it to prove you're making a difference, and then using that experience to lead your next intervention and as a source of new data. So that's everything I was going to go over today. This is my contact info, and I'm happy to talk about anything on people's minds, whether that's projects they wish they could start or questions about our program for as long as we have.